Hi, I'm Ollie. I'm a 3D motion designer, and I wanted to do a tutorial on a project that I worked on recently, which involves a rock with plants growing out of it, and I wanted to show how this was done. So previously I had attempted this, and instead of growing they just popped into existence. So I wanted to show how I managed to figure out how to make them grow. By grow I mean they start off very small and then they become normal size. They don't grow in the sense of from like seed to plant. So to get started, I used Quixel Bridge to import some assets over. If you haven't used Quixel Bridge before, I'd highly recommend using it and watching a tutorial on how to set it up properly, because it's a bit finicky with Redshift. You have to disable some settings and enable some others. So I use this sandstone boulder, I believe, for my assets on or for my render that I did originally. I believe I used this one, but this one's I'm going to use today. So it's fairly large, it's closed, which are two good things. You want that. If it's open, then you'll be able to see through it if you go around the other side of it. And we want it quite big because we want the detail in the rock a bit more. So I'll just show you some of my settings. So I've got, I think they're fairly standard. I've got displacement on and bump. I don't know if they come as standard. I did change some of these, but I don't remember which ones it was. And then models as well. I've got high poly source. That one I did have to select, definitely, and that is worth keeping on. It just increases the polygons, which is really useful for what we're going to do. So as we can see, so this is the rock. So it won't come looking like this. It will come it'll come inside a world root, and the texture won't be aligned. So this texture here won't be there, it'll be missing. So all you have to do is drag that over. The Redshift render tag also won't be there, so you just right click, render tags, RS object. We've already got that on, so we will actually that, and then if you go on that, and then the geometry we want to override, we want tessellation and displacement. It just adds some further detail, and for rocks especially, it adds like some nice ridges and that sort of thing. And then basically I dragged it out of the world root, deleted the world root because we don't need that. Next, the plants, they're from a couple of different packs. So we've got wild grass and cotton grass. I basically culled them, so took away any that were too thin, too small, or too wide, because there was a couple of like pockets of grass. Basically this keeps consistency, so they're all of a similar size, and they are over here, but we're probably going to move them slightly further away because they're a bit close. We want them quite far away because we don't want them to appear when we are rendering. So that's that. We're going to start off by adding in a matrix. So this is sort of the start of everything. This is kind of how everything comes together. So with the matrix, what you're going to want to do is right click it and go to render object, RS object. Then on particles, we want this to custom objects, and then we select, we go back on this, go like this, and then I hold shift and click on the bottom one. This will put everything in there. We then just delete these because we don't want them in there, but all of these will be in there. So technically if we render now, these will probably appear, they probably won't actually, they'll probably still appear as cubes. Oh no, see, they're like, okay, so it's all the grass, all pocketed. So what we can then do, if we click off and then actually on the matrix, we change this from grid to object, and then we want the rock, we want to put that there. So what this will do is it will put the grass on the rock. There we go. But if you look, they are, when it reloads, they're wonky, so they're not right. If we just change this to -90, it should fix them all. I'm not sure why it does it, but it does for some reason. Now they're coming out the surface properly. So we will turn this off because we don't want that affecting our scene at the moment. What we're going to do is we are going to increase this count to about 1,000. So this will appear like quite a lot, but it's what we need. We need probably about 1,000, maybe a bit more. You can go a bit less. It depends on how much foliage you want, how dense you want it, and that sort of thing. And then what we're going to do is we are going to go on the rock. We're going to right click it. We are going to go down to other tags, and we want vertex map. So what this does is, as you can see, it's made it all red. This works as kind of like a masking tool. So you can either paint on it sort of as is, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to click on it here and then go use fields. So it's got a freeze on at the moment. We don't want the freeze, so we're going to delete that, and we are going to put on a spherical field. And what this will do, if we increase the size probably to about 200 maybe, is this will change its color. So this works as like a masking. So when this is over it, when the inner circle is over, it will change color. So what we also need to do is we need to flip it. So at the moment, it is yellow near the center and then red outside. We want the opposite of that. So we want it red in the center. Ooh. And then, okay. This is really annoying. For some reason it does this. If we just move that and then that, there we go. I'm not really sure why that does that, but it does. The matrix doesn't go with it. And then, yep. So this basically be red. They're not. We might make this slightly bigger, but not sure yet. So at the moment it's not doing anything, but it will do shortly. So if we go to go here, we want a plane effector, and then in this plane effector we want to do two things. So on the fields we want to set this, so we want the vertex map on the fields, and then on the parameters we want to take off position. We want to turn on rotation, and no, we don't want to turn on rotation. We want to turn on scale, uniform scale, and absolute. So we can change that to -1.05. What this will do in a second is all of these squares where it is not touching will shrink down to nothing, basically. Apparently -1 is where it's meant to shrink to nothing. I've found that it still sort of leaves some behind, so -1.5 is where I found is the sort of sweet spot for it. And then what we can do is if we go on matrix and we go effectors, we put the plane effector in here, you'll notice, oh whoops, wrong thing again, when we move the spherical field they go. So this is what I mean, you can still sort of see them, and if we render that, it might work on this object where I can change it to 1. See, if you look, you can't actually see them, even though it kind of seems like you should be able to. If we change this to -1, sometimes you can still see some of them. On this model it is fine. It doesn't appear to be affecting it. On the last model that I did, you could see them. Okay, well, we'll keep it at -1 then. So what this will do is when this comes in, if we look now, we should be able to see it. There we go, it's all fluffy, and then we can have it so it's like part fluffy. So The other thing, I think the size might be a little bit too small. Let's try and make it a bit bigger. So the benefit of making it a bit bigger is it covers the whole thing. So we don't have to worry about some patchiness. Obviously there is some patchiness, but that's just because of how the vertexes line up. And it, yeah, basically does that. And it's a bit annoying, but it does. I'm not so keen on the size of everything. So if we change the particles, if we change this to about 2, it should make it a bit bigger. There we go, much more bloomy. That's much better. So basically we've got the base of it now. So again, every time there's the base of it, so it does that, and that's, if you animate that, it will do a grow, but we want to make it just a little bit more exciting than that. So if we go to, we want to start off with a random field. Where are we here? Random. So on fields, we want to set the vertex, and then on the matrix, we want to go on effectors, and we want the random in there. What you'll see is that will disperse everything, and we don't want that. So that's because it's got position on. So we take that off, and if we go to rotation and scale on this one. So rotation, if we change this one to 360 and then 10 and 10, what this will do is when it's sort of oh shoot, wrong thing. When the spherical field's coming through, they will rotate. As you can kind of see, these rotate as they're growing. It just adds a bit of an effect. And I've set the difference in them to 1. On my actual one, I did it to 0.5. Yeah, let's change that to 0.5. What it will do is it will add a bit of variance to it, but not too much. So it'll make some of the heights a bit different. So that is that. And then there's another effect that we can do that is a sort of more rotation-y, so it'll put things at a slightly different angle to each other. So if we firstly rename some of these so that we don't get confused what is what. So that's grow, and that is grow rotation. Ooh. Rotation. And then we want to add in another plane effector, and this one again, fields, we want that in there, and then we want that in there, and we're going to call this one is just going to be rotation. So if we change this to 1, take it off position, don't want it off position, rotation, change that to 120, and then that to 90. That should add, for a little bit of variance, a little bit of lean. You know, some things will have a bit of a lean to them, which is good. That's what we want. So basically that's the main sort of bit behind it. What we'll now do is look at scene setup. So what I like to do is if we put in a dome light, so dome light will be too bright, we're actually going to use 2 of these. So one of them we are going to set the color to black, and we're going to take away this, and then the other one we're going to turn off the background, but we are going to put on a HDRI. So if we go to so HDRIs, one that I like, that I use a lot because I think it looks really good, is Studio Small. This one, I think you can find it online. Well, I downloaded it online. I just searched up HDRIs for free, and some websites came up, and it was on one of those. But basically, just pick a HDRI that you like, or just mess around and see what you end up liking. So this is it. So it's already got a slightly better result. We're actually going to turn that off because we're going to add some things in that might slow it down. So we want to go on backdrop. Here we are, studio backdrop. So put that in, and we are going to make this quite big. So first off, I'm going to turn off the subdivision length because it will let's turn that off. It'll slow everything down massively. So width, we're going to make this massive. We're going to make this about 15k, and then the height, we're going to make that huge as well, probably about 6 or so. Depth, back a bit. Extension, absolutely huge. And then rounding like this, probably like that. And then what we're going to do is actually we're going to do the depth a bit more because we want that a bit further back. Maybe not that far, maybe like that far. And then we are going to move it down because we don't want it colliding with this at all. Now, if we render this, it won't look great. As you can see, it's white. That's not what we want. We want to change this. So if we go to here and we go to reflection, just take the weight completely off, change the color to black, and then you could also turn up the diffuse roughness. Not convinced it makes a difference, but it makes a black, like no light will bounce off of it at all. I found, so the reason why I do this is partly because we want it to affect the HDRI, and the other reason is that sometimes when you just use a dome light as a background, you get artifacting when you then go to render it. So you'll see sort of like a checkerboard effect, and then sort of adding this just sort of helps to reduce that a little bit. So there we are. So this is not the angle that we want the dome light to be at. It is it's not sort of in the right direction. So if we spin this a bit, we should see some nice sort of direction. So this one's quite nice, but it's not quite what we want. We want it a bit more on one side. So if we rotate it a bit further, you can see we can sort of basically make one side really dark. The other side is also very dark, but we can fix that by adding in a area light. So what we're actually going to do before we do that is we're going to put in a camera, and we can change this to RS camera. So we're going to get the positioning right-ish. This is just so that we can change this to RS camera here and change this to default, so we can move around whilst also seeing what we are doing. So if we put in an area light and then we move this back, so at the moment that's really bright, really bright. So what I like to do is turn down that exposure massively. That should, and the intensity by quite a bit. So we just want a little bit, and then the color and temperature, I like to change that to temperature, and then I just take it down a little bit, and that should give us a bit of a warmer look. so we get much warmer. Maybe increase the intensity a little bit, just to sort of give it a bit more, the exposure up a little bit, just give it a bit brighter, right? So we've got that like contrast between bright and dark. And then what we can do, what I like to do, is if we add a null in, this null will add basically at the bottom of the rock. We don't want that, we want that bang in the middle. So that's basically in the middle of the rock. And then on this RS light, you can do animation tags, target. And then I like to put the null in here for some reason, so that will then always target that null. So that null basically is there because with the object sometimes it can sort of target like the bottom of the object or the side, so the middle of it. So if we put that there, and then we can move this around a bit, and then say for example we wanted a bit more of like a backing look, so it'll hit there, so it's a bit more, it shines a bit more on the back. Or if we want to sort of show more of it, we can bring it around here, but we're going to put it probably about here-ish, something like that. So that's basically it in terms of like how I sort of got the positioning and everything. Now we do a bit of camera work, so we can change this. So the perspective I brought down because I like bringing it down. It brings quite like a bit of a fisheye look. So at the moment that's really small, so we just move it forwards a bit. And I also like to change the presets to one of these. I think it looks quite nice, and I just quite enjoy it. So that's that. So that's a good distance for me. I think that's quite nice. It adds a bit of rounding. If you increase it, like obviously we can change the focal length. We can make things zoom in effectively without zooming. But this is quite a good point. So we then go to optical, and I change the object. So that null that we had earlier, put that in because that's at the center. Then I like to take the aperture way down. We want the offset to be in the minus. Basically, because the plants are sticking out, we want it to be offsetted, and also the null is in the middle of the object, not on the outside of the object. We want it to be offsetted by quite a bit so that the field of view will be in the right place. Now, with this, what I would suggest doing is don't leave it on something very small. Undock it, make it massive, as big as you can, and then tweak it. So I'm going to move it onto another monitor. But basically what I do is I set it so nothing's in focus, and then sort of slowly set it at about 2 on the f-stop. Oh, also put on bokeh. Bokeh looks much nicer. So if you set it to about 1.5 to 2, and then change the offset until nothing's in focus, and then you drag it down so that things start to come in focus. So you want this mostly in focus and then out of focus back here. But it's much easier to do if you have it huge. What you can also do, make it a bit easier for yourself, if you're doing something a bit zoomed out like this, is you can change that perspective so it's a bit more zoomed in, because that shouldn't affect the optical at all. It's a bit more zoomed in, and then you can change this so that nothing's in focus, and then just scale it back so that we start to get some things in focus, especially the stuff at the front, but not so much the stuff at the back. Bring this sort of up here, and then what am I doing? Make that like that, make it a bit easier to see. So we can see that this is not quite in focus. So if we tweak this maybe a bit this way, just have a look. Still maybe not quite. You can always put it on render portion and put it on like bucket so you can see exactly how it is. So like this, I would suggest doing sort of like this bit of it. You should bucket that in one go. It shouldn't take too long. Okay, it's taking quite a long time, but if you have that bit on progressive, then you'll be able to see it pretty quickly. So maybe it needs to go even further. That might do it. Take it off that. See what it does. Yeah, there we go. So we've got this in focus. Especially like this, it's in focus. This bit not so much. And then what we can do is to like double check everything. That's what I quite like to do. Is we then minimize that quickly. And then, so with the spherical field, what we want is we want it to start maybe like up here somewhere. Right. So we got coordinates. We want to set these, and then I will quickly change this to default. And then by the end, so I'm only going to do it to 60 frames, but you want that to be like down here. Just double check. Yep. And then save that. Right. So then if we go back onto here, we know that's good. And then change that to here, and we can see better as to whether everything's in focus. So I would say that's not quite, like the very start is, but the rest of it isn't. It's got a very quick drop off. Not super happy with that. So we can increase this a little bit, maybe to about 2 point something, maybe 2 flat. There we go. So this is in focus. This is not. We can even tweak this a bit. That's not in focus, and then sort of is maybe something like that, and then just double check it with all the foliage. So we move the timeline along. There we go. That's quite a nice look. And then what we can do is we can zoom this back out effectively, and that will all still be in focus. And then all I did past that point is I set up so once I had the camera sort of how I wanted it, I then just added a circle and set it like that. So if we go camera, we want some things, we want some tags on it, so animation tags. We want align to spline and target. So target we want as this null. That will target the null always, which is good because it's basically in the center, and you want it always targeting it. Yep, so that'll always target it. And then what we want to do is we want to create a path. So using a circle, we've got the circle here. I like to just sort of rotate it a little bit, like randomly, maybe something like that. And then we make it bigger, and I make it as big as, if we got the RS camera here, I make it sort of as big as that, so that this kind of will intersect with that, and I'll show you why in a minute. I actually don't like that as that vicious angle. We also need to move it up. So we want the center roughly to be in the center of the object. Okay, so that's a bit too big, so make it a bit smaller. That's a bit too small, make it a bit bigger. There we go, something like that. Right, so that when we go like this, we can scroll along. Wait, we can remove that anyway. And then go to the camera, align to path, align to spline, we just put the circle in there, and that will reposition. And if we look on here, so that's repositioned and is looking from that angle. And then what we can do is, if we can then sort of bring this back down here, we will turn that off quickly, but you can change the position from here. So we want it really to start over, we want it to start probably over this side here, right? So if we got position start, and then we want it to end, yeah, basically where it is, maybe a bit more like there, something. Let's just have a look. Let's see what looks good. Yeah, maybe something like that. So position end. I have just realised that needs to be further over. That should be a start. Okay, so this will move with this. And this is sort of how you get your result. And at every point, it's always in focus and always centered on the right bit. It should be all good. I like to double check just to make sure where it is on the path that it's in focus. So I'd go and double check everything again to make sure it's all working. And that is it, basically. That's sort of how I did it. I might make this into a bit of a series, possibly. See where you can sort of like take this further. I've interested in bringing sort of like product renders into it, so using this as almost like a background asset. I've also experimented with using some of these. Where are we? Where are they? In here. Voronoi fractures, along with an object and a matrix. And what it does basically is it allows the matrix will change to be on all the fractures as well, which was quite interesting. It's quite an interesting result. So yeah, I could do more sort of and show you sort of like how to use this in practical settings, because obviously this is just sort of R&D, but it could be used practically. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this all sort of made sense. If you've got any questions, just reach out over LinkedIn or Instagram. Yeah, thank you.